I'm Erin O'Connell. I'm a district court judge here in the 2nd Judicial District, and I am in the civil division here. I'm also, I think, the chair of this committee and chair of the Access to Justice Commission. Pleasure to have Jennifer Albright with us today. She is the director of the Arizona Supreme Court Center for Forensic Science, Forensic Psychology, and Artificial Intelligence. She previously served as a senior policy analyst for the Arizona Administrative Office of the Courts for 7 years, where she worked on strategic agenda projects involving court security, civil justice reform, digital evidence, jury reform, and legal services reforms. And she also is a certified instructor for the National Center of State Courts and a professor at the University of Arizona School of Law, which both have tracks for legal paraprofessionals. And so, Jennifer, welcome. Stormy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Stormy Ralston. I'm the General Counsel for the State Bar of New Mexico.
Thank you. Ben.
Hi, good afternoon. Ben Sherman. I'm the current past president of the State Bar of New Mexico, and been appointed to this committee and have been enjoying it so far. And I look forward to hearing from you, Jen.
Adrienne.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Turner, and I'm the General Counsel at the Public Defender Department. So in addition to trying to help out with all the civil side, I'm hoping to figure out how we can make something work for our criminal practitioners as well.
Thanks. Anne.
I'm Ann Keith. I'm General Counsel to the Chief Justice.
Thank you. Asia.
Hi, I'm Asia Brooks. I am the president-elect of the State Bar of New Mexico, and prior to my job now, I worked as the director of the Center for Self-Help at the 2nd Judicial District Court.
She ran away from us and went to the fence. We're still mad at her, but at least she's joining us now. David.
My name is David Lutz. I'm in private practice in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I am on the board of bar commissioners representing El Paso, Doña County, and the southwestern portion of the state.
Thank you. Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Sanders. I am immediate past chair of the paralegal division of the State Bar.
Thank you, Linda. And Linda, I'll have you mute your line when you're done. I think we were getting a little backfeed. And Sarah.
Good morning, all. I'm Sarah Stedman, and I teach at the UNM School of Law.
Thanks, Sarah. Good to see you. Twyla.
Good afternoon. I'm Twyla Hoon with the Administrative Office of the Courts. Good afternoon.
Thank you. And Tesha.
Hi, I am Tesha Henderson, and I also work with the Administrative Office of the Courts.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, Jen, without further ado, let's turn it over to you and hear about how Arizona's legal paraprofessional program is working and going, and tell us all about it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everybody for having me. So just as a little context of who I am or what I do. So when Arizona started down this path of having legal paraprofessionals and looking at other legal services, things like we now license alternative business structures as well. I was the policy analyst assigned to staff that committee, and in doing that, did a bulk of a lion's share of drafting work. So all the committee meetings, ran everything, did all the research, brought all the presenters in, did all kinds of stuff like that. So, so from that perspective, that was that's what I did then. All of the stuff with the legal paraprofessional program now is sitting in what we call certification and licensing. So the Supreme Court here licenses and certifies various different groups, from lawyers to document preparers to our LPs, our ABS entities, our confidential intermediaries and all that. And so that is a division in the AOC. And they work directly with the Supreme Court, who signs off on all of those things. They just finished the bar exam over here. And so a lot of folks are out, and then they're also in management transition. So I think I have answers to all questions you guys would have beyond what I do every day and what they do now. But if we don't, we'll make sure someone follows up with all of you. If you don't mind, I'm going to try, I kind of forget how Google Meet works. I'm going to try to share my screen. I try to put a little deck together to keep us organized. Am I just sharing my screen of all you guys, or let's see, hold on, it's still coming up. It's there. Okay, perfect. I wanted to talk about the kind of the path of how we got there, because I know that's something that often is of interest to you all. Everything in Arizona starts with a committee. That's what we do here. That's how we do everything. We run our committees a little different than you guys do there in New Mexico. We had a committee. It was made up of a lot of different groups. So like this group here. So we had folks within the courts, folks within the AOC and the different divisions that would be impacted. We had lawyers. So we had defense, prosecution. We had legal aid folks at the table. We had the state bar at the table. So we had folks there from a couple different groups, but predominantly the kind of the ethics side of the house for the state bar at the table. And then all of our meetings are open to the public. So we did have a lot of stakeholders show up to a lot of our meetings. So we had certain lawyer groups, which we'll talk about here in my presentation. And we had our legal document preparers at the in the room all the time as well, because they were concerned about the impacts of their jobs. And then we invited a lot of groups in as well. So once the committee came up with the recommendations, many of you probably have seen the report that was put out with regard to this. That goes to our Arizona Judicial Council, who advises the Chief Justice. They gave the thumbs up to pursuing the legal paraprofessionals, which had a different name in the report, had a much longer, arduous name. Once we got the go-ahead, the Chief Justice said, okay, form some subcommittees, keeping some of the original committee members, bringing some others to the table in order to figure out what we need to draft in order to make this happen. So the things that had to be drafted were new code sections. So we have our own code of judicial, that shouldn't say conduct, that should say administration. So we have our own administrative code. So we had to draft all those sections, and then we had to make changes to our procedural rules, predominantly the ethics rules, but also a few other like civil and criminal rules had to be changed. And then as that was going on, certification and licensing division had to gear up to undertake the process that was being set up for them to do all of this work. So that was kind of our path. That's just kind of how we got from point A to point B. And so I know that probably prompts a lot of questions. So we'll talk about a few hot topic ideas, things that kind of came up during that process. But is there any question about this path that we had before I move on? Okay, hearing none. Reaction. So a lot of questions we get asked how did we get there? Kind of how did people react? How did we deal with this topic? As I noted, our meetings are open to the public. So we did have a lot of different legal groups come to the table, mostly expressing concern that this would be either the end of their practice or the public was going to be ultimately harmed if we had LPs. The biggest people who spoke out against this was our landlord-tenant group. And that was in part because in Arizona, you basically can't stop an eviction. There's very little protection for tenants here. Landlords kind of hold the whole bundle of sticks here in Arizona. And so there were concerns that it's pretty routine practice and that would be a big loss for some firms here, that's all they do is just churn and burn eviction related and housing related matters with regard to landlords. So they were at the table a lot. There was discussion with the committee about there being collections folks, LPs being able to help people in collections matters. So that did bring a lot of lawyers that work in that business to the table. They weren't necessarily opposed to having this group. Actually, they could see how they could use LPs. Their biggest concern was some requirements and some federal law interactions, and whether folks, they would have any problems with what they did and some of the requirements of what they did. And so they were actually more helpful at talking to us, and we actually took collections off of the table, other than kind of how it comes up in general civil. And so that was a group. We had a lawyer that was representative of family law. That seemed to be the biggest interest, and they were very interested in it. And then generally, you know, we just heard from time to time from a lot of lawyers that they weren't interested. One of our justices sits on the board for the state bar. So we were invited also to come present this to state bar, and the state bar made an effort to get a room big enough to invite lawyers to come and hear the presentation of the proposal when we were in between like the report and the AJC approving it. As can be imagined, the biggest pushback was against lawyers. A lot of lawyers were, two comments always, this will hurt the business overall. We won't be able to do work. A lot of small solo practitioners had that concern. And they were mainly the smaller practitioners, you know, solo people, small 2-3 person practices are the ones that spoke out against it. The other concern was harm to the public. The problem with some of those comments were that the way that the system was proposed and designed to be built for LPs, all the same requirements for lawyers, basically, as far as protecting the public, were in place for LPs. And so those arguments didn't resonate. They didn't go very far. It also didn't benefit the lawyers who had other, you know, serious concerns or feedback. It kind of drowned out their voices as far as, you know, some other things that might occur to make the LP program better or kind of less harmful to smaller practitioners. The public overall was in favor of it. We have Arizona State University runs a series of town halls. So we worked with them, and they ran some town halls to get public input on a couple of different proposals that came out of this committee, including the LPs. And then the AOC director, Dave Byers, got with a group, hired them to do kind of a survey. So they kind of did a kind of a polling type of survey of the public to get feedback from folks. And overall, the interest was pretty positive. The input was pretty positive from the public with regard to this matter. So although we did have lawyers really upset about this proposition, overall the feedback was tended to be positive. So that helps support the proposal and going forward. And that's kind of why we got where we were today. So I think Twyla told me you guys have heard from a lot of different groups to look at what might New Mexico be looking at and wanting to do. And you may have already some of you may have already looked at what our LPs do here in Arizona. You can get licensed based on education or experience. You are licensed, so you do get a bar number. I think our 500 series of bar numbers is reserved for this group. They have the exact same ethical rules. So all the ethical rules for lawyers do apply to LPs, with the exception of one rule and part of another rule. And it was just two things that never would apply. LPs would never be able to do those types of things, so they didn't apply. So we specifically called those out and said, everything but these apply to you. A lot of the resources that are available to lawyers are available also to LPs through their bar membership. So various resources, ethical advisement, some things like that are all there for them, other services. And then accountability. So there's still the same ability to file a complaint against an LP. You do it in the exact same manner you do against a lawyer. There gets to be an investigation, and there's a slightly different process to go forward with discipline, but the same, but for the most part, it's the exact same as with regard to lawyers. So they can be disciplined the exact same way. So they can be reprimanded, suspended, and then instead of disbarred, we just unlicense them. So they have that same accountability as well. So that's kind of what we kind of what we established. I can tell you, looking at those folks that are licensed and talking to our CLD division, almost everybody who has come in by experience. I was looking at the 2022 report. The 2023 report is not out yet. From certification and licensing on LPs, there were, I think in 2022, there were over 100 students in U of A's programs who had a kind of a direct kind of path, education path to come in via education and meet those education requirements. They were expecting by 2025 a good majority of those folks to be done with their degree and be able to start coming in and becoming LPs in that manner. So we're expecting to see the numbers. Last I heard, they were expecting the number of licensed folks to double in the next year and a half. So by 2025, and then a huge chunk of those will be people who come in through education versus experience, which they're seeing more of right now. So I'd be happy to answer any questions with regard to this, or if you guys want to wait, I'll talk about their scope of practice. Okay, so there are areas, family law, civil. Civil is only in our limited jurisdiction courts, right? So small claims, criminal law in our LJ courts. And there has to be no jail possible. So those cases where a judge says or the prosecutor says, we're not going to pursue jail in this matter. They can't touch felonies, except for they do let folks do bail review. That was a big issue. It was one of the first changes that got made to the endorsement for the licensure for criminal law. Was to allow LPs to do stuff with regard to bail hearings, and part of that was because they're just people who were not getting hearings quick enough, and then first appearances on felonies that occur in the LJ courts. If a state administrative agency will allow, folks can do practice in front of administrative bodies. So that's allowed in the state too. And then pending right now is juvenile law. So for us, that's a lot of dependency types of matters. So that was the most recent thing that was started and worked on. And that was because they were seeing a big lack of people to be able to help in dependency matters as far as lawyers go. Part of that was some stuff that was happening with our Attorney General's office up and through 2022. And so they started pursuing what they call a juvenile law endorsement. Heavily will be in dependency in that matter. So but these folks can do within their scope of practice, with the exception of a few things like in family law, there's just a couple of types of things in family law. They have to bring an attorney to help them in on, in highly, very complicated divorce cases. When you get into some asset divisions with retirement accounts and stuff like that, there's some areas that they're called out as having an exception. But otherwise, LPs are just like lawyers, right? So they can provide advice, they can draft and file documents, they can go to court and advocate, they can negotiate on behalf of their clients. So they're treated in the exact same way as far as what they can do. They have requirements to let people know they're a LP versus a lawyer. When they file documents, they have to call out not just their bar number, but also that they're a legal paraprofessional. So they have to call it out on the pleadings. They have like anything they advertise, they have to make it known. And when they appear in court, particularly when they appear in court the first time in front of a judge, they need to make sure the judge understands that they're an LP. Some of our LPs end up in front of some of the same judges over and over, and the judges get to know, and so they kind of dispense with some of that in practice. But other than that, that's a requirement of them. I looked as of February 28th, we had somewhere between 55 and 60 licensed LPs. The most common path, as I said, to licensure was through experience. And then looking at where folks are working, most of them are in what we call our urban corridor. So most here in Maricopa County, which happens to be the greater Phoenix area, the 24 cities that are here in the Valley. Pima County, which is mostly the Tucson area. And then we are seeing the rest of folks kind of scattered on the kind of the corridor. So in Pinal County, which is kind of, it kind of is the county that touches Pima County and Maricopa County. So Tucson in Phoenix area. And then Yavapai County, which is just to the north of us. Kind of get to the northern suburbs of the Phoenix area. Kind of when those start to drop off, you hit Yavapai County. So Prescott Valley, and your old stomping grounds, and Keith. That's we're seeing people, and then we're seeing some people show up also in Coconino County, which is Flagstaff, but not very many. So they're mostly in the central corridor, where, as you can imagine, most of our people are. That does tell us it's not necessarily solving some of the issues we were hoping at getting folks out to our rural areas. Where we have, legal representation deserts, but that's where our LPs are kind of today. So that's some of the highlights that I had for you guys, and then I just wanted to open the rest of it for questions. Like what detailed questions did you guys have that I can answer in the vein of all that?
Jennifer, could I ask, as far as you had mentioned the LPs, they announce it in court and they announce it, on their filings and pleadings. But as far as Arizona bar, the court, et cetera, what type of public education did you engage in to, announce the invention of, as well as the development scope of practice, just so the public was more aware of what was happening?
Not really anything. So kind of not our style over here. I mean, on the Supreme Court's website, there was information that was put out. I think there was a couple of news releases went out. I'm not sure that they got a whole lot of attention, but they did go out to some of our news sources. I do recall, like our public radio, like our NPR station here, did a piece on it. That's not going to get to most of the general public, as you could, but they're the ones who I do recall doing something active. The bar was pretty much aware of it, as far as lawyers knowing who they were going to then bump up against and deal with, and what they could or could not do because of how much we had worked with the bar with regard to that. But we didn't do much beyond that.
Jen, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that the LPs can do mostly everything that attorneys can do. And so can they, some of the questions I have are, can they take depositions? Can they conduct mediations?
I think technically the answer to that is to the extent that a lawyer can, in the case types that they're allowed to do. I don't think we see a lot of depositions in our misdemeanor criminal cases. We see them rarely in criminal cases anyway, right? Or in our civil cases. But yeah, we very well might have some. We have some red car, blue car cases that are not mostly insurance, party driven. You might see them there. So technically, yes, they would be able to conduct those.
And no problem with mediation. I'm sure there could be quite a bit of mediation, I imagine, in the family court and some of the other civil matters.
Yeah, and here we do have a lot of just court designated programs that folks go through to do that, for especially for family law, for mediation. So in that sense, I don't think there's a lot of that happens with the LPs. I also can tell you, I was looking at we have a directory online that we put up eventually I think this will also integrate with the state bar's directory of lawyers. They're working on having the LPs in there, and you can search by someone who's an LP there. But I was looking at where people with a family law endorsement, out of close to 60 folks, I would say 90% of them have the license for family law. That's where the majority of people are, and they are working in law firms. They're not solo practice LPs. So a lot of family law practice firms have hired LPs. Actually, what a lot of them have done is they've taken their paralegals, helped them get what else they need, and then made sure that they helped them study for, whatever time they needed to study for the test. and are supporting them in those efforts. And that's where the majority of them are. And so I think in those situations, it's really easy for those folks, for the lawyers to step in when the lawyers need to step in, or to say, the law firm is saying, LP, yes, you can do all these things, but within our firm, we're limiting you also as to how we use our LPs. But other than that, yes, they can do those things.
Asia.
I was just going to ask, it sounds like maybe that helps with some of the pushback by lawyers about, you know, competing with them with these types of cases, right? Did you all do any sort of like town halls or any sort of info sessions on, hey, like, we understand this is your concern, you know, smaller firm attorneys, here's some ways that this could be helpful to you?
So Asia, in that, one of the things that we did is when we either had lawyers present at committee meetings and they are allowed to give, if we didn't invite them to speak or just actively engage them, like, give us some feedback on this while we're having a discussion as a committee, they're always given it. We always do a call to the public. So we always said, well, that's fine, you have trouble with this for this reason, but if they could do these things for you, would you consider it differently? So we did try to actively have that conversation. When we did the presentation at the bar and lawyers got to speak, we did call out that the LP, there was a lot of things in that way that we were discussing how LPs could benefit, especially smaller law offices, right? Like, instead of, you know, you have a paralegal, they can't run to court for you and handle certain stuff. They can't generate business for you. But if you had someone who's an LP, right, maybe you can have an LP and a paralegal, right? And that's your three people. And if you're a sole practitioner, it's the lawyer, right? And here's how you might divide those interests. So we did have those conversations. And at the same time, the task force was pursuing the alternative business structure license. So non-lawyers can be partners in a law firm now, right? And so that was another thing that we pushed is, hey, you know, lawyers, now you have another avenue of folks who you might be able to invest with, right? You and an LP might get together and have a small practice, and that might be much more powerful than just you and a paralegal. Yeah. So those were the ways that we did it. We didn't do any additional stuff in that sense. So we could have, had we had the powers that be wanted to.
So Jen, you're still not seeing much greening of the legal desert, so to speak, yet. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I can tell you, I know that I literally just had lunch a couple of weeks ago with the head of certification and licensing. I've known him for quite a long time over here. We had lunch because we have lunch once in a while, but he keeps trying to get me to come down there and run the LP program, and I keep saying no. So it's like 3 times they've asked me to go down and run the program. 3 times I have said no, but not because I don't support it. I actually think it's fabulous. And I'm a former paralegal program instructor. I was chair of the paralegal program there at CNM for a number of years. Have done that over here as well, taught in programs over here. I actually am I'm a fan of this trend personally, as a person who has practiced law and been a public defender and a prosecutor and done some of my kind of own work as well. But that said, no. And so one of the efforts Aaron is making is, how do we get people into our more remote areas? How can we do that? Is it through trying to work with our different legal aid agencies around the state and get more LPs there just to reach folks that way? So before we had the LPs, we had legal document preparers here. So we had scribes, essentially. I think that's the easiest way to describe it for you folks, because you guys have talked about a scribing program. And so we've had legal document preparers, and they, of course, were very frustrated by this, because for a long time they've wanted more power and authority to do more than just, and they're always on the cusp and struggling with, am I giving advice, not giving advice? We're not a forms-based state, so they have to find which form is the appropriate form for folks, and they have to find what's the, to help people draft motions or things, particularly in different types of case. We have dependency can happen in probate court. It also can happen in juvenile court. So yeah, there's just kind of a lot of like, is that the right type? Are we going for the, and so that gets into the legal advice territory. And they sometimes have done some small appellate work, and then that's been some issues for them as well. So they were kind of really concerned about that. And we have a lot of, we call them LDPs for short. We have a lot of LDPs in our rural areas. So we were like, how can we elevate at least those folks to move from being an LDP to an LP? Like, what support are they needed? Do we need to come up with some way to help fund them for if there's an education gap for them and they don't necessarily have the practice? Do we need to find some lawyers that will let them do some work for them, right? And bring them on and let them do some stuff so they can get supervised experience to meet the substantive law experience requirements, so somebody can sign up on them. So those are some things Aaron's are looking at, Judge, in order to try to get that gap that we haven't got yet, right? So also, is there more advertising we can do? The first way we started to try to manage those legal deserts was to work with our community colleges. So we actually have some community colleges that are a bit more in the rural areas and that draw a number of folks from the surrounding counties that are rural as well. So surrounding where the community colleges are. So we had 4 of our community colleges at the table. One here in Maricopa, mainly because I drug them to the table because I worked with them at the time. But in Pima County, which gets a lot of our southern rural border counties, that community college had a paralegal program. So we said, look, can we really work with you to advertise this? And then we did it with two of our northern counties as well. We just haven't seen those programs kind of help pick up the ball for us. And so I think Aaron is actively pursuing trying to re-engage with them and get them to the table, because maybe that is a way we can address those legal deserts as well. But yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
And Jen, like New Mexico, oh, sorry, Adrienne, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And this is so helpful because your state, as far as I have been able to determine, is the only one that is doing this with criminal practitioners. And I didn't realize that you had added the felony first appearances and the bail appearances, which is really helpful for me as well. Your LPs are allowed to hang out their shingle though, right?
Yep, and we have several that have. I think I counted 5 or 6 of them so far have hung out their own shingle.
But they're still mostly working for law firms.
Yeah, I would, like I said, out of close to 60 folks I saw on the list, I think there's maybe 4 that have a criminal endorsement. Okay.
Are they doing it for the public defender department, or are they doing it for private lawyers? Do you know?
While we're talking, I can look. I
also just can't imagine how you would do like the FFAs or the bails and then not, if you're not working for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
How you would just do a part of a case. But I mean, that is what I want for, selfishly for my department, is to be able to do those initial appearances, status conferences, and get our paralegals and hire on new folks. So this is the model that's most appealing to me, in conjunction with the other things. But it's interesting to me that overall you have that ability for people to get independently licensed, and they're not really doing it. That's the part I'm most curious about. How come that's not sort of taking?
Yeah. I would say that's a good question, why they're maybe not picking up the mantle for criminal. I would think that it would be our public defender's offices. So we actually have a public defender, a legal advocate, and a legal defender. So right. I worked for the public defender in New Mexico for a long time, right? We have a public defender's office, and then you have contract counsel and you have conflict counsel, right? I did a lot of conflict cases, and I always had a appellate contract.
You had an appellate contract for a while.
Yeah. I had an appellate contract like forever. Well, because that's when I worked for the public defender's office. That's where I was, except for when I did the juvenile mental health stuff for a little while when that first started. When Phyllis got that grant to get that started. So, you know, I don't know why they necessarily haven't picked that up. It's also interesting because here in Arizona, the one place you can practice law and not take the Arizona bar is for a public defense office. You just have to be licensed in another state. So I keep making that argument that I can go do habeas work for one of our counties because it's criminal. And I was like, well, really, you're just advising the judges. Can we just not have me get licensed over here? Because I didn't want to take another bar exam in my life, right? So I was talking to Aaron about that the other day, and I was like, I just see this being a wealth of public defenders just, you know, being able to go and, you know, do that docket, you know, and sit and do like first appearances, like, and send an LP to do this. And so maybe we just need to have a bigger conversation to see why maybe the public defender's office is not pursuing that. Is it because they still have so many people applying coming out of law school? They haven't seen a need because they continue to have the budget to be fully staffed and they're not having a staffing issue. I did look. The folks who do have the criminal endorsement are in rural areas, and they did hang out their own shingle. So that's what it looks like from the list based on email addresses, and where they say they're working at.
And you said 5?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Jen.
So I think our, you know, family, I think, generates like so much interest, right? And we hear so many people talk about family, and we all know people who have unfortunately had to do stuff in family court, unfortunately, right? I think that's why we see that is the place where it took off the most. Also, that was the part of the bar, as far as lawyers, that was most interested. So we do have a number of folks who have a civil endorsement as well. And some of them coupled it with, I keep saying an endorsement, it's technically a license, but I think of it as you're licensed, but only in certain areas. And for a long time, we called them endorsements, kind of like you get a motorcycle endorsement on your driver's license if you took that test, in addition to driving a car. That's how we thought of it at first. But we did have a lot of folks who have gotten family and civil together. But those are the firms who seem to want to hire folks. I mean, I think we have a lot of family law practices here who were heavy on paralegal, light on attorney. And I think what they did is they got behind their paralegals and helped them get licensed as LPs. And now they can do so much more, right? And they're able to now they're not turning away as many clients. Well, they're not, I shouldn't say turning away. They're not getting as many clients because the client says, no, I'm not going to pay a lawyer for that much money. Like, I need help with this distinct thing. Or my spouse and I are mostly here on our divorce. We just need help with a few things, right? Or I just need this one distinct issue. We need to change. Somebody's moving and we need help changing how we're going to do. We agree on custody arrangements and how we're going to manage it. We just need the court to change the order, right? And so the law firms are like, yeah, we can do that. And it's not that expensive for you because we'll just have our LP do it and we supervise them. And so I think that's why. So I just don't think other folks have caught on to how to use them very well.
And Jen, go ahead, Sarah, go ahead.
Jen, that was super, super helpful and valuable for us. I appreciate it. And you've actually answered the questions that I have, except for one, and that is, and you may have already covered this, so apologies if you have, but in terms of cost, was part of the intention to have a set low bono, or that there's some talk or regulation of fees charged? So the income eligibility, meaning we have rural deserts, but we also have poverty deserts for folks that can access legal services. And I'm wondering what the range is in cost and what their clients have to pay.
That's a good question. And we don't know yet. There has been discussions of us trying to do a study here soon of what what law firms who are using them are charging folks for the use of the LP, and then what LPs by themselves. But at this point, we don't actually know what they're charging. We don't have I don't think we don't have, some of the same requirements on pro bono service here. Coupled with these programs, we tried to get lawyers to do kind of and embrace more, like limited services practice. A lot of lawyers were shying away from that. We tried to put out, example agreements they could do where we're like, if you have an agreement like this, it should protect you if someone files a complaint against you. It should be like a no-brainer for the bar to say no. You weren't obligated to more, or you did with what was in the scope of what you said you would do. The state bar, has got on their website where you can say, I'm looking for legal help. Kind of like you go on Yelp and say, can you give me some quotes on like fixing my roof, or, replacing, some small electrical thing in my house or something like that. And people will give you feedback, and they've included the LPs in that now as well, is my understanding, or they're in the process. If it's not live, they're in the process of doing that to try to figure out that sliding scale. But other than that, no, we haven't necessarily gotten there. To piggyback off of that as well, since you're at the law school, right? The ASU has not gotten on board with programming. U of A has. Now that's just a difference, I think, in the law schools, right? Our law schools over here, ASU is kind of more of the pushing for, those folks who are going to go into the academic realm and those folks who are going to go into the firms. Like that's kind of more how they're built. U of A is the place that has an innovation center. They are more about, getting folks out to be lawyers. And so it was a natural fit for them, I think, to push people to be LPs. And I think that they have a lot of discussions that this is a way that they can do no bono or low bono, and that it's important for, if you're going to become an LP, to do that as well. And they do have those conversations in that realm. Even though they're not obligated to do so, lawyers are not obligated to do so here either. So
yeah,
does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it certainly did. And actually, a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Or two, my thought was, if most of your folks come through the experience channel, not the education channel, I wonder if filling that rural gap might be best done through community college education in those areas, right? That might be a way to get out of this urban family law practice. And it's just another piece of that, which again, doesn't speak to our need for the rural representation. Do you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The answer to that too is the ABA. So, you can have ABA approved, not quite the same as accredited law schools, but it's a big process to go through to be ABA approved as a paralegal program. For paralegal programs, the ABA is really backed off on how much has to be in person. And so you could have, like, I think in Arizona, in New Mexico, if CNM is still ABA approved, and that's what you wanted, was it folks to be, it's not, Linda, they're not anymore. They dropped it. Oh, that's too bad. But you, right.
Sorry, when they went to entirely online classes, they lost their ABA accreditation.
So they don't do their program in person. They have no in-person component of it all. Okay. Because I was going to say that is a way that we've talked to our programs here about bridging the gap, right? That are ABA approved. I think 2 of our 4 are ABA approved, and was like, they can do so much more online because the ABA did reduce like the number of in-person hours you have to have. Now, something we did here in Arizona for this committee to take into consideration, we don't require the paralegal, a paralegal degree that's from an ABA approved program, right? So we say if the court recognizes the program, that's good enough, right? Meaning because we are the regulatory body, that it's good enough for us. And the reason why we did that is 2 of our programs, Pima County and Yavapai County community colleges, let go their ABA approvals several years ago because of just cost, right? The cost to them for doing it. And they didn't find that it was going to hurt their graduates at getting jobs as paralegals within the state. And they kept their programs running just as if they were ABA approved. They really didn't change much, maybe more online classes than they had before, but that was about it. And so in that sense, that is something you can consider as well, is if you set up like this is your education pathway for folks. You can do it through these community colleges because we've approved these programs, right? And you could just set it up as a regulatory body. You give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down as the program. So, and that may help as well right now that colleges are more online. My MLS, I teach in the MLS program, MBA and law program for U of A. And they, like I said, they have LP pathways, right? Like, here's what it is going to take to be an LP. These are the classes you're going to need to take if you want to go practice as an LP in these areas. Those programs are pretty much all online. So because U of A also has an international program for those 2 degrees, right? So 60 students, will have 30 are in the States and 30 who are out of the country in that sense. So now that we can have more robust online programs, you guys could just designate that that's okay. And I think that that would be a good pathway, is if you could work with your community colleges to have very specific programming that you guys say, this is the regulatory body we're okay with, right? And just make them be accountable to you in some ways. And most colleges are interested in that because it means they have something more that they can advertise, right? To say, like, this is something that you can do. So.
And Jen, just so I understand, if someone were to just go full-time in Arizona through the education path, approximately how long does that take? In other words, there's always that trade-off, right, between you don't want to make it so onerous that people are like, why would I do this? I'm just going to go to law school, as opposed to this is a better path for me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that was a huge discussion we had. Is this really end up being less expensive education wise? Therefore, right? That's a huge thing, a huge part of the conversation. Huge part of the conversation was lawyers charge so much because one, they have such a debt to pay off. And so they're trying to pay their law school debt off, so they're justify their rates at that. And two, the business overhead of being a lawyer and with licensing, CLEs, keeping the lights on a building, that type of stuff, right? Technology, access to books, Westlaw, whatever it is that they want to have, like, that's the bottom dollar. This is what they have to charge an hour. So can we charge less for LPs? Isn't it going to be cheaper? So that came into not only those rates, but the education piece of it as well. So I'm just looking back because there have been a few changes and pending right now are some more significant changes to our code section, mostly to clean it up and streamline it for what the requirements are. But if I'm looking at the associate's degree, because that would be the shortest education path, right? So give me a second to get there, because it's a really long code section. I used to kind of know it by heart, but it's changed enough. I don't know it by heart anymore. So I want to say it's going to be about 3 years, meaning 2 years for the education piece and a year's worth of experience under the supervision of a lawyer, so that lawyer can then help endorse you, right? So you can do it with as little as 2 years if you have an associate's degree in paralegal studies from any of our four community college, that or an outside college, and then our certification and licensing will look at that program and say how close it is to our programs in our state. And I think they automatically give a thumbs up to any ABA approved program from out of state someone has a degree in. If it's non-ABA approved, and they compare it, they compare it to our other program around here. And then obviously you have to have a certain number of hours, right? So I don't know if you've looked at our code section. We tell people, like, you have to have 3 credits in ethics. You have to have, if you're going to do family law, you have to have so many credits in family law if you're going to do, right? So that's what they do. And they say that it's one of the things that it took them a while to really sort out was those transcript reviews in certification and licensing. So I would say, like, within 3 years, with 2 years of education at a community college is where you're at as far as time and money.
Along those same lines, Jen, what for, the paralegals working in our office now that have, whether it's an associate's or a bachelor and a paralegal certificate right now, what are they, what would they do under your program to get licensed? Is it just a test?
They would want to pursue coming in through the experience pathway if they've been there a year or more, depending on the work you've had them doing.
Okay.
So our path is, first you must take the exam and pass the exam. Once you pass the exam, once you're notified you have passed the exam, an exam's 2 parts. There's always a general part. Everybody has to take the general knowledge part that has ethics and just general things in it, right? Just general principles of law in it. And then the second part of the test is whichever license you want. So if you are going for family law. If you're going for family and civil, it's the family and the civil. You end up with 3 parts. Once you've passed the general part and 1 specialty area, right, topic area, when you get your score, you get the information that says, here's what's next. You have to go through character and fitness, just like a lawyer has to go through character and fitness. You'll have to get fingerprinted. And this is the application, right? So you have to fill out all of these and then go forward. And it reminds you, if you're coming in for education, here's what you have to do if you have to come for it. So your folks, the public defender's office, here what you would be doing is saying, what kind of work are they doing? Are they doing stuff that will meet the experience requirements? If not, what more can we give them? Right. So if you have them doing routine motions for extension of time, which is really just a form-based, that's not going to count, right? But if you have had them drafting more substantive motions, like a motion to dismiss, where they actually have to look at some facts and some law and tweak it from time to time, right? Specific to a specific case and situation. Motion for change of venue based, right? That would be something you have to tweak from case to case. Do they have enough experience? If not, at what point can you get them enough experience? And that's the path you would want them to take.
And the Board of Bar Examiners is doing all of the same character and fitness, the same process as the lawyers do in Arizona?
So we have a separate group doing it, but it is the same character and fitness application. They go through all the same stuff. We also do not allow lawyers who have been disbarred or who are currently suspended from being LPs. That is a big no-no. That was one thing attorneys were really afraid of, is that disbarred lawyers somewhere else are going to come here or within the state are just going to be like, we'll still go out. And we were like, we're far ahead of you. Like, if you have been in trouble with the bar, if you're currently in trouble with the bar, especially severe enough to get disbarred or be linked, have a suspension that's active, you don't get around it by becoming an LP. And we don't let our LDPs either be formally disbarred folks, or our document preparers either. So yeah. So,
and similarly, does your disciplinary council for attorneys, is that the group that regulates the LPs?
Yeah. So we have a board of non-lawyer professionals that vets the applications. That's the so we have this same group, right, that vets applications. The Board of Bar Examiners, right? Like, you got your test passed, you pass character and fitness. Like, we approve all your stuff. We send your name off and you can get licensed. The Chief Justice signs off on your application. You're good to go here. We do that through a separate board for LPs so that we didn't burden the bar that way. So we appoint our board. It's a mix. We have now that we have licensed LPs, we have licensed LPs on, we have lawyers on, we have public members on. And they vet all the applications. They make sure through character and fitness, they will do the hearings if someone is denied for character and fitness and wants to appeal, because we let lawyers do that, so they can come in and say, yes, I had this thing in my past, but here's all the things that show that's not a problem anymore. Like, I was in a unique situation, it was bad, please don't hold that against me, or whatever it is. So same thing. And then exact same thing goes forward for discipline. You file a complaint at the bar through the exact same link that you file one against an attorney. They have the same group of folks at the bar that investigates those. I think they have a different interim process before it comes to our presiding disciplinary judge. So I think that board also that does applications does the kind of initial recommend that they just get like something like a reprimand or whatever. We have a probable cause committee who does that for lawyers. The board does that for LPs. And then if a person ends up wanting a hearing or it's very severe, it goes to our PDJ. And I don't think we've had any cases get there yet. So I don't think we've had, I tried to get the information if we had any discipline at all against our LPs. I didn't get the answer to that just because Aaron is out sick today. So is half of everybody who was over at the bar exam. So as you can imagine, being in a room full of people, that you're just going to get sick, right? But I didn't get the answer. I can shoot that back to Twyla and she can share it with you if we've had any discipline at all. But we do put a report out. There is a report that comes out somewhere by March, beginning of April, every year that says what's happened in the prior year, how many people were licensed, what pathway they came, what kind of discipline there was, if there was any, how many complaints there were. And that's all publicly facing.
Thanks, Jen. Stormy.
I was just wondering how you created the exams for these. Did you have I'm forgetting what the name of the person that creates a psychometrician, or
yeah,
I mean, that can be a complex undertaking.
Yeah, it could be. The clinical answer is to that. Certification and licensing and the AOC director hired a test writing company, and then put a few committees together, like little work groups of folks like in family law that do general civil practice, that do criminal stuff, and said, what should we be testing for? What should this look like? To get an idea. And so in doing that, they looked at the rules they grabbed is source material for the examination. We looked at criminal stat, for example, for criminal, grabbed the criminal code, and grabbed criminal rules of procedure, right? And then we had some folks who were also educators also on those work groups and said, this is what we should do. And then they gave that information, and then the examination writing company wrote an exam, and then that same work group reviewed those questions. A couple of people opted out of it because they knew they were going to be hiring LPs. So they're like, we don't want to be reviewers. And we found other people to step in for them to be a reviewer, so that they didn't, they weren't privy to the type of stuff that might be ultimately on the exam. And then they had staff literally getting ready to go through the process. So we asked them to step aside if they were going to be in that situation. And then they did make some efforts at validating that. I have seen people talk about, essentially lawyers say, like, we didn't have enough people take the exams for them to be validated, really, right? The criminal one, we've had very few people take it. I can tell you our pass rates have been pretty poor on first examination. I won't be able to get to it really quick, but I don't know. They're worse than our bar exam pass rates. I don't know that they're always worse than our bar exam pass rates, but they were the first couple of years they were really low, and I think they have since tweaked the information for preparation, and like the kind of like how to study, the study guide. They've tweaked that a little bit to make that a little bit better, and they've communicated to the education partners to say, if you have folks who are going to do this, here's more information about how you might talk to folks about how to study for this. It is, I recall it's mostly multiple choice. I don't know if it has any short answer or essay on it. I personally probably would have taken a little bit a different path with regard to examination myself, just having worked in education for 20 some years in the law. I would have done a bit more work on our end before we gave it to examiners in order to write an exam. And I would have maybe found ways to have some folks test the test ahead of time. But we do have a process where they're continually looking at the exams and saying, like, can we better validate them now, and how do we need to update them?
All right, we're at 1 o'clock. Any last questions before we let Jen go? And Jen, we really appreciate, this has been very informative today. Thank you so much. I'm confident we'll be circling back with you.
Yeah, anytime. Like I said, any questions, and if I can connect you folks to anybody, if anybody at the law school wants to talk to folks at U of A, let me know. Keith Swisher is the person who's really behind the LP program over there. I have known him for a very long time. We worked as colleagues together at a law school in the past and have known each other a long time. So I'd be happy to connect you to them. I know U of A keeps wanting to build ASU their own certificate program. They just can't ever get around to getting it done. And the only lesson I can tell you is, I think from listening to other states and from what we've done here, you just got to commit and choose the way you want it to be. And you just got to go forward and be willing to make adjustments and tweaks as you go forward. We had to make a lot of changes quickly after just because it's so much to do, right? Changing rules sets and doing all kinds of things. But anybody over here will be happy to talk to you. I know when Aaron is available again, he would be happy to be direct contacts for you when he gets his new LP manager up onboarded. I'm sure they'll be willing to talk to you. And I'm always happy to help New Mexico with whatever. You guys are still home. So always happy to help.
Thank you so much, Jen. Don't be a stranger if you get on back to New Mexico for any reason.